On this month's In the Life, Sandra Bernhard and Camille Paglia shake things up.
Just to be gay, just to be a dyke was never my motivation. If that was what it took, then I would end up being, involved with a man.
Talking politics with Richard Kim.
The way gay rights will sort of play out in the elections, you have to look back at 2004.
And Dr. Marjorie Hill and Wilson Cruz take on some tough issues.
Marriage doesn't save one, doesn't protect
Marriage
one.
is not a condom.
Marriage is not a condom. That's why you need condom sense.
In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Ameringen Foundation and by Arcus Foundation and by Agnes Gund and Daniel Shapiro and by the annual support of In the Life members like you.
Welcome to In the Life. I'm Michael Billy. In this episode, we expand our popular conversation series into a full special hour. In our first conversation, longtime friends, social critic Camille Paglia and the uber-talented Sandra Bernhard talk about celebrating sexuality in their work, the many faces of lesbian identity, and the influence of gay male sensibility in art and culture. Here is a conversation with Sandra Bernhard and Camille Paglia.
So Sandra, the first time I ever saw you perform on stage was in 1992. The BBC had me go and see you. I came backstage, and the first time we met, we've had a friendship for a long time now. I think it's good for us to talk about how gay male sensibility heavily influenced both of us. Can you talk about that?
Well, I mean, it's kind of everything interesting about our culture. The whole gay camp sensibility. We grew up with it with Paul Lynde, with Charles Nelson Riley. When we weren't even aware of that's what it was. In the day when everybody watched it and laughed and thought it was brilliant because nobody felt threatened by it. And then of course the minute somebody put a title on it and put a description to the face and the sensibility, everybody got intimidated. But for those of us who are creative people, it's something that's just always been a part of our lexicon and our oeuvre. I've hung out with gay people, gay men. Well, I can remember, but specifically my first sort of, visceral reaction was when I went to see Bette Midler in 1973 at the Palace Theater here in New York City in her first big show. And I'd just come back from working on a kibbutz in Israel for 8 months, and it was the first time I saw an earring on a man. And I remember I was walking up the stairs, and there were all these men, and they were just fabulous and talking and excited, and the sibilants and the S's, and there was a man with that little tiny hoop earring, and I was like, oh, this is a revelation.
I think it was like a kind of pre-Stonewall also style among gay men that that was shed for a while in the 1970s. Remember that kind of clone look with the lumberjack
exactly.
kind of thing? And
yeah, that was it.
Gay men thought it was too sissified and tried to get rid of it. It is still thriving, that campy style among gay men abroad. I find it everywhere in England and practically any gay man, outside of America. But I think people are a little uneasy about it now. I find it crucial for culture, for theater, for writing, for comedy in general. And so I think one of the reasons for the impoverishment of current in the current entertainment industry in the United States is because not only we lost so many gay men through the AIDS epidemic, but because that particular style is regarded as kind of quaint or archaic or dated.
Well, also you have to remember that a lot of gay men now have wanted to settle down. They want marriage, they want their family, they want children. So there's like a whole next wave of being a gay man. The young gay guys that come to the big cities are still, camping and whoopsing it up, but it's all influenced by, Queer Eye for the Straight Guy and that whole mentality, which I think is very commercial, and it doesn't have the originality that, you know, we saw in the 70s and the 80s and even the 90s, the voguing, the street culture.
Yeah.
Street culture in general is on the wane because it's harder for artists and thinking people to live in the cities. It's too expensive. The wealthy people come into the city, and there's just something about being wealthy, whether you're gay or straight, takes a certain element out of your persona.
Yeah, I think the young men, do use wit to as a form of drama in bars to attract and to communicate, and then but why is it that lesbians never have? They don't. Why? That's not the way I have no idea.
Well,
I have no idea how lesbians attract each other. I've always been a total failure, at the social scene.
First of all, when I travel around America, when I'm in the Midwest and I see half the women who are supposedly married and straight, I go, Who's that overweight, big-ass dyke over there? And then they're with the whole family, a whole brood, and some husband. And it's like, I think gay women have always found a way to be in a marriage and just sort of settled. And I just think, I think that there's been a revolution, and I was sort of at the eye of the hurricane in the 80s. I was like, seriously attacked for being feminine and allowing myself to be sexualized. It was always done with tongue in cheek, and it was always like, laced with irony, even when I was on the cover of Playboy. And of course, it's like when you look great and you work hard to take care of your body, you want to celebrate it. And I don't really think it's about really and truly about attracting anybody. It's really kind of self-aggrandizing.
Well, that was the period when you were interested in the fashion industry, as I was.
Well, when it was interesting.
Right, when it was interesting. And gay men always were, but it was a period in feminism that was very anti-fashion industry and anti-porn, anti-sexual images. So that's one of the reasons that you got hit, as did I.
I just think, to play out, your comfort with your body and your sexuality. I mean, it's like looking at yourself in the mirror while you're having sex. I mean, you're just looking back at yourself and going, I look fabulous and I look hot and I want to be hot. But I don't think it really means anything more than that.
Gay men never had a problem with pornography, but you were getting all this stuff from Catherine McKinnon and Andrea Dworkin in the 80s and the early 90s, all about how pornography degrades women without any sense that porn is at the heart of gay male culture.
I know Andrea's been gone for a while now, but God bless her, she was never a looker.
No, the AIDS epidemic of the 80s into the early 90s had produced a certain kind of militance and hysteria, I think, among urban gay activists, and so you were either with them or against them, and you were like persona non grata. And so it was a terrible time, a terrible Stalinist time that I'm very glad is over.
Who isn't? I mean, I just think that, it was not. I mean, just to be gay, just to be a dyke was never my motivation. I mean, if that was what it took, then I would end up being, involved with a man. I wanted true liberation, and true liberation. Is when you control your destiny and your life and your visual and the things around you. I love glamour. I love comfort. I love delicious food. I like wonderful conversation. I don't want to be depressed. I don't want to be unhappy, and I don't want to be on pills.
Mm-hmm. Well, these people calling for liberation and tolerance, and they're being so intolerant to other people within the movement. I mean, it's just I was called homophobic. I was the only openly gay person, at the Yale Graduate School in the late 1960s.
But this is the same thing with me. I was on stage, talking about sexuality and swinging, and all my pieces were about sexuality, and yet because I wouldn't come out in some sort of an interview and say, yes, I am a lesbian, a word I deplore, unless I'm going to the Isle of Lesbos, which by the way, we were looking at going to Greece this summer. It is a barren rock of an island. I thought, well, isn't this interesting?
It's off Turkey.
We got stuck with this friggin' description. I just want to be a woman, and I want to be a woman who is allowed to control her life.
And we should talk about the transition in lesbian culture to the lipstick lesbian triumphant, since the early 90s.
Yes.
Now, you were on two different shows, on Roseanne as a lesbian, and then on the L Word as a straight character.
Right.
So what do you feel in terms of the way that the culture in general is processing the lesbian image?
When I played the character on Roseanne, originally I came on to be Tom Arnold's girlfriend, wife. And I think that was such a brilliant statement, to be driven to, to the opposite, sex after you've been, fondled by Tom Arnold. Anybody would want to run into the arms of another woman. Roseanne just liked stirring up the controversy more than anything. I don't think it
was pioneering.
Yeah, it was pioneering. But that, for me, playing that role was just, it wasn't like she got underneath it and really mined it, and got political. It was like funny and crazy. She had the gay man on there. She just wanted to have a pastiche, have everybody on there representing, the culture and the world as it was.
So what do you feel about the L word?
I've known Eileen Chaikin, who created the show, since 1984, when she was an assistant to an agent at CAA. So, she's been observing over the years. The thing that she did capture is the kind of passing around of women. There's a small gene pool, of availability.
The musical chairs aspect.
So that's true. But then there's that next level of women that are just I don't know, they're just they're twisted, they're freaked out, and they call each other late at night. Or now the whole thing is texting, and I know these two women have been texting each other, and one of them is "You don't want me. This is I'm a disaster," and and you're moving in too fast. You're not fast enough. It's that weird So she did capture some of that.
The obsessive lesbian drama aspect of it, I don't think is necessarily good publicity. Well, and the other thing that what really bothers me is Jennifer Beals. I think looks absolutely phenomenal. Okay, and really revolutionary character. However, why can't lesbians be shown as professionals? Why can't an ordinary meeting be conducted, without lesbian drama being injected?
I know.
I think it's terrible.
It's they can't separate it.
Yeah, I think there should be lesbian drama in the office, but not in the public meeting. And no wonder Jennifer Beals kept getting fired.
Thank you. Of course,
Yeah.
It's inexcusable.
It is.
And the other thing too is she always looks like she's on the verge of crying. There's none of that. There's no carefree, real happiness in that show.
Yeah.
She wrote that character so that I could, dress Jenny down and make her become a more serious writer, which was, it was a fun character. It was a throwaway. To me, the people that I like best on the show are Sybil Shepherd. But, some of the ancillary characters are more interesting to me than the main characters.
At least it has changed the visual image of the lesbian. It used to be, people thought, you could not recognize a lesbian. There's a certain way that a lesbian looked, and now I think it's the L word has made it clear that there isn't.
Yes and no, though. I think that they still kind of go for the cliche, like the girl who wears all leather, or the background actors. They obviously find local gay girls to populate the scenes. I just want to see gay women who are just relaxed and cool and moving and grooving and navigating through life.
And I'd like to see that they have a work ethic, and that
would be helpful too.
Yeah.
Shane you never see her cutting anybody's hair. It's honey, get back to the salon. Let's get back to work.
Your public persona, is so utterly unique. Just as a as a stage performer, what do you feel your influences are as a theatrical presence?
Well, I've always looked to women, throughout my entire life. That some were comedic, Mary Tyler Moore, but I love Mary because she, to me, was the ultimate bachelorette in her day. She lived that swinging lifestyle. To me, that I always wanted to be a swinger. I wasn't interested in one sex or the other. I just wanted to be perceived as somebody who was swinging, hot, knew how to put on a big nice boot and and laugh and throw my hat up. That's what I really tried to perfect in my life, is being the carefree, fun, sexy. And then I went to the Julie Christies and all the European actresses. The Charlotte Rampling, so that I could have that mysterious, pouty, sitting at the bar, smoking a cigarette, even though I don't smoke or drink. But you know what I mean?
You do have a Charlotte Rampling. Yes. That perverse period was the Damned, where she was playing those sort of S&M things.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've drawn from all the the greats, and then comedically the Bette Midlers and the Lily Tomlins. But then of course I went to my musical influences. Dusty Springfield and Joni Mitchell and Laura Nyro, Carole King. So I had my musical, sexy, hippie thing going on. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of an amalgam of all these women, and with a little frisson of Mick Jagger and Tina Turner.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because I always looked at Diana Ross. I've always looked to my black ladies for the ultimate in style and joie de vivre and sexiness.
Well, when you burst on the national scene or international scene, really, with a king of comedy, that particular psychopathic kind of a role it's like indelible. It's one of the great one of the great crazina
scary
roles. Yeah, and that
I didn't do myself any favors with that one either.
You're lucky you didn't get actually typecast playing that kind of.
Nobody else could create a role like that for me. So that forced me to go out and create my own genre of performing.
To me, that role is like the role Jessica Walter played in Play Misty for me.
Absolutely.
Those two. And this really has very few roles have had quite that oomph. I mean, maybe sort of Sharon Stone as Catherine Trammell in Basic Instinct, like sort of walk that line between sanity and sanity.
That was a little campier though. Sharon. Speaking of a campy man. Mm-hmm. I think she really drew from that.
Mm-hmm. But there are very few great roles for women like that anymore.
You're telling me? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's impossible to find anything because they want their women to either be, completely subservient and sitting there as passive observers, or if you're going to be sexy, it's just sort of, Angelina Jolie, I'll devour you sexiness. But, for a woman just to have that, 70s, 80s, Mary Tyler Moore, fun, a little introspective. You can't find those characters. I guess Tina Fey sort of, has walked into those shoes. It is difficult to be a bigger than life and controversial and sexy and threatening to a lot of people. And don't forget, we're living in a period where, with Laura Bush, who's just been anesthetized into oblivion. Now, I mean, I love the way for the past 8 years those daughters have been kept under wraps. And now in the 12th hour, they're coming out with their books and their weddings, and we have to endure this.
In your stage show, how broadly do you deal with politics?
Well, I've been the most political I've been during the Bush administration, just because you couldn't turn the other cheek. I mean, obviously, the Clinton era, the most controversial thing was his, sexual peccadillos. But I never touched on it because everybody talked about it, and I just thought it was too boring. But, I talked about the women. I talked about Laura Bush. I talked about Teresa Heinz Kerry. I did a very interesting piece about Condoleezza Rice visiting the Martin Luther King Museum and having Rosa Parks, the ghost of Rosa Parks, come and have a visitation with her, and have a big discussion about her blackness, and how she was a mark against her race.
Well, it is difficult for women to find the proper persona for politics in the United States. Does a woman have to be a mother? Does that normalize her image? And if she's a single woman, does that make her strange?
I even think at this point a woman or a man can be gay, and I think there's probably obviously they pop out here and there when they go into the more perverse areas, they get exposed.
Well, gay men are definitely rising in terms of administrative positions. For example,
exactly.
there are a number of gay university presidents, including at my own university, the University of the Arts.
Right.
John Buffington has just been appointed in the last year.
I think it's becoming less and less an issue, and I really believe in the next administration will be close to gay marriage. I mean, unless it's John McCain, but. Although I don't think he even cares.
Popular attitudes do seem to be maturing. I think because younger people don't care as much about these old hot button issues.
No, they don't. So I think that I keep telling all of my gay friends who are concerned to just hang tough for a few more years and they'll have it all.
You must represent yourselves, and you must speak directly to the public.
Say no to Cosmo. I'm trying to create a new sort of gay activism.
Don't ask, don't tell.
It is time to wake up. You've got to wake up, and you've got to make some changes.
We are going to be taking over City Hall.
Next month on In the Life. Coming off a busy season of LGBT film festivals, we take you inside the Miami Gay and Lesbian Film Festival for their 10th anniversary. and also celebrate the best of gay and lesbian independent cinema.
You need to see new films, you need to see filmmakers talking about the craft of their work.
The whole film took on a kind of ease.
All this and more on next month's In the Life. I recently sat down with Richard Kim, associate editor of The Nation, to discuss some of the hard-hitting issues affecting the LGBT community in the U.S., from the politics of marriage to the influence of gay media. Here is a conversation with Richard Kim. Richard, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Michael.
During the Iowa caucus, there's an opportunity for the representatives of the candidates to talk about their main issues that they believe in for their candidates. What I saw on the grassroots level was people talked about health care, universal health care, safety, the borders, immigration, all these things that are very important. One person spoke on gay rights and civil rights. So in a time where all these things are incredibly important to the people of this country, where does civil rights and gay rights come into play?
Well, one way I'd answer that is that, gay rights, gay politics have taken something of a backseat in this election. I think that's an appropriate choice. I mean, we have an occupation in Iraq. We have an unfinished war in Afghanistan that we need to get out of. We have 45 million Americans without health care. We have an economy that is sinking every day. We have the greatest income gap this country has seen since 1928. Right? The top 300,000 Americans made more money last year than the bottom 150 million, right? So these are really big issues, and they cut across gay and straight America. They cut across black and white America. They cut across all Americans. In terms of, sort of the way gay rights will sort of play out in the elections, you have to look back at 2004. And that actually, if it played out at all, was to the Republicans' advantage. They ran these incredibly fear-mongering campaigns around anti-gay marriage initiatives in all these states. They turned out, waves of religious right voters. So I think going into 2008, it's a good thing that there are not that many of these initiatives on the ballot. And it's also a good thing that you looked across at the Democratic candidates, and they didn't shy away, right, from gay people. They didn't shy away from appearing on the Logo debate, which was held, the historic debate for presidential candidates. They haven't shied away from mentioning gay people in their campaign speeches. Barack Obama says there's not a gay America, there's not a straight America. So I think, gay issues and gay people, right, have been, involved in this campaign. I think they've necessarily sort of receded a bit as these very pressing, very urgent issues have come to the forefront.
You talked about 4 years ago. Where are we now? Where's this movement going? We have the web, which is influencing the movement. Is it what we saw, holding hands and singing songs and soulful, or is it more of a new age of activism?
The way I would answer that is to say I don't think we have a movement anymore, a singular movement. Some of this is because, after Lawrence v. Texas, the Supreme Court case which overturned Bowers v. Hardwick and legalized sodomy in this country, there was a kind of splintering off, and even before that, right? So you have people that are very invested in getting gay marriage or some form of civil union on the books. You have people that are looking at Don't Ask, Don't Tell, trying to get that off the books and have gay and lesbians openly serve in the military. You have a really vibrant trans movement, right, that is formulating all kinds of new politics around gender expression in the workplace and identity. You have gay people concerned about other sort of progressive issues that don't really speak about them from just a gay perspective. People advocating for universal health care, people looking at income inequality. A great group that I'm involved in, Queers for Economic Justice, that looks at the way wealth disparity impacts and poverty impacts gay people. So you have a lot of people, right, doing a lot of different things, and I don't think that's actually a bad thing. Right? I think it's a sign of maturity, actually, of a movement that has achieved a certain basic level of legal protection and is now looking at other forms. And people are prioritizing their political action in a different way.
The 80s and 90s, ACT UP, activism, Larry Kramer. The guy's been quoted as saying, "We will not accept crumbs." The passion that was fighting for the gay and lesbian movement at that time. Do we see the same passion in the movement today?
The thing to remember about ACT UP is that, it wasn't just a gay movement. It had a sort of queer energy at its heart, but there were drug addicts involved, sex workers, lots of people of color, actually, who haven't then been documented as being ACT UP because many of them sort of died earlier than the sort of wealthier white folks who are in ACT UP. There was this kind of anarchic creativity there. And what did they take on? They took on pharmaceutical companies. They took on the NIH. They took on the CDC, right? They took on government interests. And they politicized AIDS and death and disease and health and all these things in a way. What might we learn from ACT UP? Actually, one of the great victories on the healthcare front, one of the only victories on the healthcare front in the past 20, 30 years has been ACT UP. If you are HIV positive in this country today, you will be provided with the necessary medications, either through Medicaid or Medicare, or private insurance, or through ADAP, the AIDS Drug Assistance Program. That was an ACT UP victory. So we need to go back and look at how they did that, right? And get universal health care for all Americans in this country. And that wasn't, you're absolutely right, that wasn't by being complacent. That wasn't by just pushing through little legislation here and there. It was about holding massive demonstrations, taking over the stock market, throwing ashes of dead lovers, right, on the White House lawn. It took direct action. And I think we may need that today when you look at the sort of entrenched interests of pharmaceutical companies, the medical lobby, who are going to block, right, any plan for universal health care.
If you show up to any march or go to any gay pride across the United States in any major city, you see a multitude of companies that are selling products.
It's a sort of tricky thing because the sort of presence of gays and lesbians on TV, in advertising, all that stuff. I'm not going to say that it has had no impact, particularly in shaping the sort of opinions of younger people around sort of queer visibility. I would say, look at the gay pride parades, which are now, this is sort of unimaginable, right, 10, 15 years ago, but supported by Absolute Vodka and Subaru or whatever, And I do think you lose something right in there. You lose a kind of community building aspect of it. And to a certain extent, gay people have become just another sort of niche market, right? And that's happened, that's a sort of, plight of kind of diversity in this country, right? That you market things to African Americans that are under 35. You market things to older lesbians who have a dog. And that's sort of like where we are. And that's a sort of larger corporate capitalist kind of sort of media saturated society we live in. I don't know what that spells going forward, but there you are.
Gay marriage.
Yeah.
Arguably the biggest initiative, the top priority for the so-called gay movement.
I think the main problem here, right, is that we've sort of narrowed our conception of what families, kinship, queer sort of social arrangements have been historically, right? And now we have this kind of idea that this one-size-fits-all thing, marriage, is going to help all gay people. And it's not. And the reason it's not is because it doesn't actually help most heterosexuals, right? Most marriages end in divorce. The majority of people now live in unmarried households, right? You have both heterosexual and gay people having all these sorts of creative arrangements, raising kids together in unmarried households. Someone might be the person that you turn to for your health care. Someone else might be your roommate. And then another person might be someone named on your will to inherit your property and income should you die, right? So you have all these very creative arrangements with gay people, right, pioneered, right, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? So where is that diversity gonna go, right? And to my opinion, the fight for gay marriage, while I believe in full equality, in front of the law, has sort of short-circuited, right, this other kind of creative energy, right, about improvising kinship relations, improvising legal arrangements. And I would finally say, right, that that's what most Americans need now, right? It's not just a gay, straight issue. You have all these people who are raising children outside of marriage. You have all these people that live in these sort of naughty, interesting kind of households, right? So to raise gay rights as a civil rights issue, right, sort of really narrows the way families look.
You've written about gay media consolidation. How is that going to affect the movement?
Well, I think it's a kind of mixed bag when you look at it. You have Planet Out Incorporated. I think that's what they're called, and they own both The Advocate and Out and all these websites. Then you have the sort of Blade chain that's a sort of chain of independent gay newspapers. So in terms of print publishing, there has been this consolidation, and I think that's a bad thing. I think it sort of has limited the diversity of voices. But then you look at the internet, right? And there are all these fantastic, fantastic gay blogs. And they kind of actually remind me of the magazines like 20 years ago. They're sexy, they're kind of cheeky, and they have an ironic tone. And they also cover politics, right, in this sort of day in, day out way. I'm thinking of Billerica, which is this great blog, and Aravosis has this really great blog out of DC, and all these sorts of people that are just, blogging, having group blogs, and I think that's the kind of future, actually, of gay media.
Hi, this is Patricia Rissette. You are backstage at the Metropolitan Opera, where I am rehearsing Peter Grimes. You are watching In the Life.
In our final conversation, Dr. Marjorie Hill of Gay Men's Health Crisis and actor Wilson Cruz discussed the status of the AIDS epidemic, the impact of homophobia, and the importance of self-esteem for LGBT youth. Here is a conversation with Dr. Marjorie Hill and Wilson Cruz.
I just think that too many people think, not you, not me, and perhaps not the 45,000 people who were at AIDS Walk, but many people think that it's over, that it's not really a serious illness, that you pop a pill.
Right.
I had a conversation with my hairdresser, and she said, listen, if you have type B blood, you have a higher resistance to HIV, right? You can't really get it. And I'm like, girl.
No. Sit down. Get your hands out of my hair. Sit down, right?
Right. I mean, and while, as the chief executive officer of Gay Men's Health Crisis, getting my hair done, I can do HIV one-on-one.
Right.
But there are lots
of
people
who else is thinking that, right?
Who are in beauty parlors and barbershops and clubs and grocery stores and schools all across this country who are not talking about HIV.
Well, and here's the thing, part of the bigger problems, I think, is that there is this feeling that it's over and that it's a manageable disease, right? So people are taking it less seriously, but at the same time, we're also, as a community, giving out this message that we need you to go get tested. And so we're trying to let people know that this is still a crisis, but we don't want to scare people from not going and getting tested. And I think, culturally, or even class-wise, I remember growing up and never going to a doctor unless something was wrong. That's what we didn't have a lot of money growing up, so we went to the doctor when we were sick.
Right.
We didn't go to the doctor for preventive reasons. So how do we get people to let go enough of the fear to actually go to the doctor and say, I need an AIDS test?
Well, I think it's also about, and I just want to emphasize the issue of stigma, because you're absolutely right. Lots and lots and lots of people don't go and do preventive health care for a whole variety of reasons. But to ask your doctor for an HIV test is owning something.
Mm-hmm.
It may be owning that you're gay, heaven forbid,
right.
If you don't have a gay or lesbian sensitive physician. It may be owning that you're having sex, and as a teenager, that's like taboo.
Right.
As a woman over 49 and a half, that's taboo, because...
Or owning the fact that you may not know your partner as well as you think you do.
Oh, now that's a big one.
Because there are people who are out there married who need to be getting tested as well.
Absolutely. And so, marriage doesn't save one, doesn't protect one.
Marriage is not a condom.
Marriage is not a condom. That's why you need condom sense.
But, you have to own these things. And it's also, you have to be honest with yourself about them enough to go get tested. But then at the same time, we don't want you to think, well, now you're dead. If this comes back positive, you're not dead.
Right. It is not a death sentence.
It is not a death sentence.
And information is power. But I also think that adjacent to the stigma is also issues of self-worth and pride or lack thereof. That as African American women, heterosexual or not, as gay men, African American, Latino or not, there are so many messages that say we aren't worth it.
Mm-hmm.
That the country doesn't value us, our communities don't value us, we don't value ourselves.
So then why should we value ourselves? Right.
So why get tested?
Right, exactly. So, I don't know the answer. I'm asking it to the ether, I suppose, but how do we change that? And I think part of that is maybe having people who represent something to us out here talking about it.
I think you do know the answer, Wilson, because I see you living that answer. I mean, I think that while you are a very effervescent and talented and fun person and successful, I would imagine that not every day has been wonderful. No. And you have persevered, and you continue to do that. And I saw you at AIDS Walk, encouraging other people.
Look how beautiful you are. Let me hear it. They said it was gonna rain today. You brought the sun.
I am always amazed at the dynamic power of moving out of who we are as individuals and coming together as friends, as family, neighbors, co-workers, and people of conscience to make a difference. AIDS Walk New York is the oldest HIV/AIDS fundraiser and public health education event in the world. And it's really phenomenal because it really is about the power of each and every one of us to influence those people in our lives, influence them to give money, influence them to get tested, influence them to be aware of HIV. And so having a $7 million event
in this economic climate
has
to be overwhelmingly satisfying to you. The thing that's always been exciting for me about AIDS Walk has been not only the fact that people get to have this opportunity to raise money and be active in this community, and people want to feel like they can do something, and it gives them the opportunity, but also at the same time, they have an opportunity to honor the people that they have lost. And to me, that's always been the most overwhelming moment, is when you're walking down the streets of Manhattan and you turn around and there's a mother or a relative who has a sign in their hand.
Yeah, well, in many ways, it's a walk of remembrance and commemoration. It's a walk, and I almost said march, about resiliency, particularly in terms of the gay community.
What does that do for our message about stigma? When we see on the news that here is a whole city saying, this is something we care about.
The problem or challenge around stigma is that you really still need strength and support to do that. And I think, Wilson, your being there, other celebrities being there, give other individuals who don't have your breadth of access the courage to stand up because, well, he's cool and he's here.
Well, yeah, well,
and he's good looking and he's here.
I've met some of the most amazing people on that stage. I sat next to Ben Vereen one year and I almost flipped my wig. But I think that what I hope people understand is that these, quote unquote celebrities are there for their own personal reasons as well, and what an incredible honor for us to be there and stand on that stage and see the throngs of people. And if our being there means, it gets a few more people in the street, then fantastic. But it's also a lot of fun for us.
It is a lot of fun.
And I get to talk to people I wouldn't ordinarily get to talk to, and I can't believe that I've been doing this for 12 years now,
You're a regular.
I'm a regular, yeah. Yes. Well, yes. I mean, I just want to, I want to make sure that people know that it's necessary. It is, I need them. I personally need my people, our people, to go out and get tested and take care of themselves because it is something that we can deal with now, and I've lost too many of my friends, too many people in my own family. And I have people in my life now who are living with this disease and living large, or as Toni Morrison says, that are as big as life.
Yeah.
And they're living them. Yeah. And I need that. I need to know that we're out there taking care of ourselves.
And so I think that in many ways, while condoms and other tools of HIV prevention are key, pride is part of HIV prevention. Education is part of HIV prevention. Having a house, having a home, someplace that is yours and that is safe.
A touchstone.
Having people who love you in your life. Being able to be out in the world is HIV prevention. And I remember once I was at a Women in HIV conference, and they introduced me as the first African-American woman to run gay men's health crisis, and talked a little bit about that. And I talked about the work in general, but really focused on women because that was the conference. And when I finished my keynote, I sat down at the luncheon table with a group of women who were from sororities and so forth and so on, business women. And one woman said, "My, Dr. Hill, it must be really interesting working with the gay men's health crisis." And I said, well, yes, it is really interesting, but not
the way you think it is.
For the reasons perhaps that you think, because as a lesbian, I've done this for a long time, and they were sort of taken aback. And I wasn't trying to make her
uncomfortable.
Well, I was trying to make her uncomfortable, but I wasn't trying to make her feel bad. But I think the issue of being out, whether someone presumes you are straight or presumes you're gay, I just think that part of what homophobia does is reinforce silence. And you can't do HIV prevention silent.
Stay tuned for more from Dr. Hill and Wilson Cruz. But first, here's a look at In the Life's October season premiere.
We're gonna get married. We're gonna get married.
What a day in San Francisco! What a day in California! What a day for America! What a day for equality.
Tune in for the October season premiere, when In the Life takes an in-depth and comprehensive look at the fight for marriage equality in California. When When the landmark decision allowing same-sex couples to marry was announced in May, In the Life was there, on the ground to document this historic moment.
After being together for 32 years, we can now get married. The sunshine you're seeing today is sunshine that is now going to extend to every place where it is hard to be a gay person in this country with this ruling.
The best day of my life was when Diane and I met, and so this is the second best day of my life.
California history is now a history of love, and we believe Californians are going to stand by love.
We'll look at the hopes, fears, and struggles on the front line as this crucial battle unfolds.
By the way, as California goes, so goes the rest of the nation. It's inevitable. This door's wide open now. It's gonna happen.
So how you feel about marriage?
I can't wait to meet somebody to marry. That's how I feel about it. Do you know anybody?
Talk to me later.
Okay, I will. I'm excited about what's happening in California. I think I haven't read the whole decision, but because it's a lot. But the thing that was most exciting to me was that the court basically said that there's no room for a second class of marriage in the state of California, that all citizens have the right to equal marriage. And we're talking about civil marriage here. So all of these arguments from various groups in which where they're talking about religion really have nothing to do with this. We're talking about a civil marriage in which the state of California is recognizing these relationships, some of which have been happening for 50 years. I know a couple that have been together for 50 years, and all they want to do is be married. So it's very exciting. We're also talking about the validation that these relationships now will get, and what that does to a person and their self-worth.
Yeah, well, first of all, we know from history that separate is not equal.
Hello.
And so having different types of institutions for the same thing does not work. But I think that same-sex marriage is good even for people for lesbian and gay people who have no interest in marriage, because it sends a message that if you choose to have this civil opportunity and have your relationship cast in this way and have the 1,102 rights and privileges that go with marriage, you can have it. And that's like saying, well, if you want to go to college, you can go. If you don't want to go, you don't have to.
That's fine too, right.
But you should have that opportunity.
Right, and that this is the pinnacle of what you want in a relationship, that you are sharing a life with somebody, and that sharing and receiving of life is acknowledged by your government. That you are no longer, your love is no longer seen as something other.
I was on Rolanda, so that's a long time ago. You probably remember Rolanda. Stop it.
I do.
Stop it, Wilson. With my parents.
Oh, really?
And talking about marriage. So this had to be, like before the flood, right? But and she asked my parents, did they believe in same-sex marriage? And that wasn't a deal. She wasn't supposed to ask them anything. And my mother kind of panicked. But my dad said, well, if you're going to be with somebody, you ought to marry him. And it was so simple.
How do we get him on a court?
But it was so simple.
Yeah, because it is that simple. The fight we're fighting right now is for something very simple, like marriage, that says, I just want to love this person. I want to share my life with this person. I want to be able to visit him in a hospital. Yeah. I want to share my life with this person.
And I think around the HIV prevention connection is both, again, around self-esteem, valuing both individuals and relationships. If a person feels like, well, my relationship is going to be acknowledged, I'm going to be acknowledged, I'm going to be validated, then what I do matters.
I also think about it in terms of when I, as growing up as a teenager, and coming out and figuring out what it means to be a gay man, what it must do to our youth to know that they can live a life where eventually their relationships are honored.
That's right.
As opposed to growing up in a place where they're frowned upon and looked down upon. What that does to our youth, and what in the end that will do to their self-worth, that will end up helping them do what we were talking about earlier.
Well, just think about it, Wilson. It's sort of like I go someplace and I say, this is my girlfriend. This is my girlfriend. And whether it's to my grandmother, to my employer, to the state Supreme Court, that's very different than saying, this is my wife.
Yeah. It's two completely different things. You're stating a commitment to this person. This was a wonderful day in the history of California.
Yeah.
But what is about to happen in California is going to be mind-blowing because there's going to be an initiative on the ballot that will try to change the Constitution, and the battle that will rage between the two sides is going to be epic. It's a big state.
The struggle continues.
Oh, yes. It's far from over yet. But I do think they're going to have a hard time passing this initiative, and the numbers and the polling suggests that it all looks very good for us. That's because we're changing hearts and minds one person at a time. And California really has been doing the hard work for a long time now. But it's going to be a long haul.
Yeah. But you sound hopeful.
I do. Come on. How long have we been fighting this fight? You can't do this kind of work unless you're hopeful.
Yeah.
And I've always said this. It's not really about me. It's not about what it's going to do for my life. It's about what it's going to do for the life of my brother, let's say, and the life of the youth that I'm talking about who are watching this, and they need to know that we're doing it for them.
I sometimes feel like the LGBT community has a real opportunity to demonstrate the power of one joining with the power of others and focusing on those issues that impact us as a community, but also going beyond that.
Yeah, well, we have a long history of that. I'm sitting here and you're sitting here because of the work that so many people who've gone unnamed, but some of whom we do know their names: James Baldwin, Audre Lorde, Bayard Rustin, Barbara Jordan. These are people who walked that walk for us, so that we can sit here and walk a little further for those that come after us. And that's what I think about. That's what keeps me going.
Thank you for watching In the Life. To see extended versions of our one-on-one conversations and to download past episodes 24/7, please go to our website at inthelifetv.org or call 1-800-627-ON-TV. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Michael Billy. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Ameringen Foundation and by Arcus Foundation and by Agnes Gund and Daniel Shapiro and by the annual support of In the Life members like you.